Welcome to For Real I Do with Brittany Ellis, the unfiltered side of weddings. From planning truths to vendor insights to navigating design, culture, and family dynamics, this is for couples who crave clarity and vendors ready to elevate. Your insider pass with just a little oversharing.
Yeah, nice to see you again, as always.
Thank you again for joining us and continued conversations around ceremonies and helping couples to be intentional and helping families to just navigate, I think, just their relationships with the priests that they're bringing in for their events. So, really supportive.
Yeah, it's great. It's so important. And I think hopefully we can share some perspective for me as a priest and my experience, as a priest and also as a guest at weddings and some of the observations that I've seen and how we can, all do better and maybe take some things into account that'll help our couples, our audiences, our planners, everybody that's involved in this entire process.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that, a common theme that we're seeing, at least still going on today, is that what was discussed in the planning stages and ultimately what it results in on the day of the event is that there's a disconnect. And I'm just curious from your perspective, I'm sure you've seen this yourself. How
Hmm.
do you feel that families can sort of avoid feeling blindsided on the wedding
Yeah.
day?
I think it comes down to really setting the expectations and really from both sides, right? Understand that the wedding, it has to be structured. It's structured for a purpose, and both sides really need to understand that. One of the things that I like to do and you all help facilitate so well is to have those initial conversations in the beginning. And, the first conversation is usually just to get to know the couple and get to know their families, maybe, or maybe we bring their families in later. But then at some point, we're going through the itinerary, the timeline in the actual ceremony, and let everybody know what the entire ceremony entails and who's going to be involved in what part of the process. Because, if you as a couple or as a family or even as a planner have any surprises on the day of your wedding, then something has gone wrong. And I think 100% that falls on all parties. One, as the priest, I want to make sure that everybody knows the expectation. As you know, my big thing is flow. During the ceremony, we need to have flow in order for us to meet a certain timeline or a certain time constraint that the couple has. We have to make sure things are moving. And that means everybody knows, who's on first, who's on second, who's up next, right? And that really allows things to move smoothly. So if you don't know that and something comes out of left field, I'm sorry for the baseball analogies. I just not intentional, but these are things that really, throws the entire flow off. It causes delays and causes frustrations. Nobody wants that. We don't want the couple to have any kind of upset faces while they're there looking at their guests. So it really starts with setting that intention. And I know I'm going on long with an answer, but I just want to say to my fellow pundits and priests, namaste, pranam. I have deep respect for what each of you do. But at the end of the day, we have to remember what the purpose of the ceremony is, and the purpose is for the couple. I've seen it where it becomes more of a performance than anything else. And sometimes we forget that, we are there to fulfill an obligation to a couple. It's nice to be able to showcase our talents and showcase our knowledge and things like that, but there's a time and place. And usually a wedding that is so organized, not only in the ceremony, but everything else that happens around it is so meticulously organized as you all do. And we have to be mindful of that, that we're not just the only cog in that wheel. We are just a part of it, and we have to help keep things moving along.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Neil, I feel like you hit on so many of the things that I definitely want to dive deeper onto. And that's really supportive, I feel, of a framework of setting those expectations. Do you go
Yeah.
as far as to chat with the couple of who's going to be coming like on and off the mandap during certain steps? Because I've sort of seen that play
Mhm.
out where there's confusion on weddings.
Yeah.
Who's coming up? Who's sitting down? When are the parents going to the front row? Are they go how does that
Yes.
play out for you?
100%. You have to. I mean, if we are looking to have any type of organization and any type of seamless flow in the ceremony, everyone that is involved in the ceremony, even from just the parents or maybe grandparents or, a brother or, a sister that might be helping out the bride or someone that they want to include in the ceremony, anyone that is a part of that ceremony that comes on the mandap needs to know what their responsibilities are, when it'll happen, what comes before it so that they can be prepared. And we go through all of that before. Like I said, we have multiple meetings between me and the couples, and I invite anybody who is going to be a part of the ceremony or anybody who just wants to learn to be a part of those sessions that the couple is comfortable with, of course.
Mhm.
And then we go through everything and we, let everyone know because we've seen it, I'm sure you have, where we get to the part with the jaimal or the garlands and we don't know where it is, or someone has the rings and that person is off somewhere and we don't know, we have to wait for them to come back and all these different things. So luckily that hasn't happened working with you all. It hasn't happened in any of the weddings that I've done, but I've been a guest at weddings and I've seen that these delays happen because of things that could have been avoided with proper planning and proper direction to those involved.
Yeah, and I'm curious just from a guest perspective, because that was going to be one of my questions. Sort of a hype word right now is creating a guest experience. And so couples
Hmm.
have really honed in on not just decor or the amount of meals that they're hosting or the hospitality that they're offering. It really is about that experience that people are walking away from. From your perspective, both as a pundit as well as someone who's attended events, when there's disorganization going on,
Yeah.
can you tell that there's stuff going on, and like how does that impact like your experience, would you
Yeah,
say?
100%. Usually when I go to weddings, I'm with my wife and I'll make some comments or I'm like, oh, I'll kind of like, make like, sigh and, just, oh man, I can't believe this is happening. And she'll kind of like nudge me a little bit and say, hey, it's okay. You're not doing the wedding. It's fine. But also I look at all these things as missed opportunities to showcase our culture and the beauty of it. I'll give you an example. I went to a wedding a few months ago and I was sitting around with some people who were not of Indian descent. And after the wedding, I heard one of them make a comment, well, everything looked beautiful, but I wish I understood what was going on.
Mm,
And you see oftentimes in the crowd, you'll see like people hunching over, or maybe a family member will explain to someone and say, hey, okay, this is what this part means, or hey, they're waiting on this. This is why there's a delay or something like that. So you'll hear it coming from within the crowd when it really should be coming from the mandap, from the pundit, engaging that audience and keeping them involved in the ceremony.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was actually going to say that like a lot of the couples that we're working with, actually I would say majority of them are multicultural, multi
Hmm.
faith. And so
Yeah.
to what point, when you're chatting with couples, or maybe just something to encourage couples and families to chat about, should there be a discussion surrounding like, here's how much percentage that we want you to actually chat, and maybe in
Hmm.
Sanskrit, and here's like essentially what we want to be translated? Like, how would
Yeah.
you navigate that conversation?
My philosophy is this: the Sanskrit is the tradition that carries the vibration, that carries the energy of the ceremony, but the English carries the understanding.
Mm,
It carries the meaning behind everything that we do. Oftentimes, I hear people say, "Oh, well, your culture or your religion is so outdated, and why do you do all these different things?" Well, because everything that we do has a meaning, and that's why I say it's a missed opportunity when I go to weddings and I don't see that meaning being conveyed, even to Indian people of Indian descent. When I was young and I went to weddings or any ceremony, that was the norm. We wouldn't get explanations. Nowadays, luckily, there are more pundits that are taking that initiative to
mm.
explain. And that's been my whole life mission, is to share the beauty of our culture, our dharma, and all these rituals and make it practical. One of the biggest compliments that I get after any wedding is from anyone, regardless of Indian background or not, is coming up and saying, I learned so much today, or I learned something that I didn't know before, or there was so much beauty in that. There was so much meaning in that. And I think that means that I have done my part to not only share that with the couple because they can have a greater sense of ownership in that ritual, that sacred tradition that maybe they weren't sure about, or maybe their family said, "Hey, you have to do this," or "This is what we always do." And then after walking away, they can say, "Okay, I understand why we did that." And also the audience can say, "I'm so glad I came. I can celebrate their love and I can understand what it means that these two individuals are coming together in this covenant, in this bond, in this marriage to start their lives."
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. And it's in what we're seeing, especially with like the new generations that are getting married, right? Millennials, your Gen
Yeah.
Zs. And those couples are very intentional. They are actually they're more hands-on with planning couples I had 5 years ago. I'm like, I was planning with mom 5 years ago. And now like couples are involved with every decision and they really want to create an intentional experience. And everything leads up to the ceremony. Ceremony's like the main show. It's like we're all here to witness that union.
Yeah.
Of course, couples want to essentially feel connected and a part of their event. I've had situations, to be totally candid with you, and it's no disrespect to any of the priests that I've worked with, but it's almost like what was discussed and what was agreed upon and what was outlined. It's like we get to the event and
Yeah.
it's as if there's been a personality shift or just like it's very odd. I'm like, "Hey, remember we talked about this?" And it's almost like as the planner, you're kind of getting shooed away and the family's getting
Uh,
shooed away. And and you're in this very awkward position where we're live, we're in front
yeah.
of all the attendees. And it's like if you have a situation where I say someone goes rogue or the priest goes rogue, there's nothing that really at that point can be done. And it sort of is a shame. And I guess
Uh-huh.
with all respect, and I just am curious on your thoughts here, similar to wedding planners, right?
Uh-huh.
Some wedding planners are best fit, or event planners, let me say. Some event planners are best fit for like a corporate event. They probably
Yeah.
shouldn't be doing social functions. They're
Mhm.
not warm-hearted. They just don't connect on that way.
Yeah.
They're better positioned here. Would it be so far as to say that maybe like some pundits aren't meant for social functions or meant for weddings specifically? Like maybe that's just not their specific niche calling?
I think in terms of the knowledge and being able to perform the wedding and perform the sanskar, they certainly have that. They
Mhm.
certainly have the understanding, and that they've studied the rituals and studied the shastras, which are the scriptures, as we say. But at the end of the day, I think that's a great analogy. Oftentimes where I will speak to a couple and they might say, "Well, we have our family priest. He's been doing, pujas and havans and services for us since I was a baby. And my family really wants them to do this ceremony." And they'll ask me about my take with that. And I will say, honestly, even though you have the knowledge to do the wedding, you have to understand that there are so many other factors that are at play, right? As I mentioned, we're often dealing with situations that in a modern audience, in a modern environment, there are limitations not only from time but also in that event schedule. And obviously the ceremony is the primary focus, and that is our goal. We should be able to prioritize that ceremony, and everything else is secondary. However, in that time, in that framework, like you said, being able to develop a way to capture the spiritual significance, capture the meaning of what we're doing, relate it to a modern audience, a younger audience, and stay within a time frame that you don't lose your audience and you don't spiral things out of control where now you've put everybody on the back foot and they're going to have to adjust. When you perform a wedding, you have to have a mindset of all these things and all these factors. And yes, a pundit that may perform your family puja may not be the best choice. And I say this with all respect because they are accustomed to having, a usual amount of time that is flexible for them. They don't have those constraints in a home or, like they do with a venue or certain other places and factors that are happening. So having a pundit that knows and has done weddings and accommodated, all these different factors keeping in mind is very important. And I always tell families, certainly you will ultimately pick the pundit that you want to choose. And if that relationship with your family priest means the most to you, know that that relationship that you are honoring is probably going to come at the sacrifice of either time or of either your guests not being able to follow or maybe something going off plan than what you had discussed. So knowing that all of these factors, it's a give and take. How much do you want to have?
Yeah, honestly, Neil, I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate you being so open and transparent on that because, again, this isn't a situation in which we want to obviously bash any pundits out there. It's
Right.
really just the reality of the situation is because at some point, if you can't have like a mutual respectable conversation of how can we structure this ceremony and then stick within the parameters and boundaries that we feel most comfortable with,
Yeah.
I think it is going to ultimately show up on your wedding day. And, it's a shame, but it happens.
Yeah, and like I said, I completely agree. This isn't, to bash anyone. It's to me, it's just the truth. It's to see the reality of what we're dealing with. These weddings nowadays, like you mentioned, it's a completely different generation of couples. It's a different, it's not like a wedding back in India or back in, somewhere that we may have grown up, in a different time or different place. We're dealing with so many different factors now, and we have to be able to accommodate and adapt to those situations while keeping the sanctity and the tradition alive. And there are ways to do it. There many pundits that do it. I'm proud to say that this is my goal in life is to be able to bridge that gap between the ancient and the modern and find that balance and make it relatable.
Yeah, and I think that whoever's listening to this or the couples out there that are sort of feeling the effects, or maybe they've attended the weddings where they felt the effects, just knowing that there are obviously incredible pundits like Neil that are trying to create a little bit of bridging that gap. And that makes such a big difference because the last thing any of us want is this bride's been looking forward to her wedding day forever. She's been basically has a Pinterest board that's been
Yeah,
ongoing for 15 years. She's been
right.
waiting and then she feels almost like discouraged during her ceremony or certainly discouraged after it's over. I mean, curious if a couple was going to book you tomorrow, what would you say are like the top three conversations that you would need to make sure, or top three things that you feel like you need to identify from them? Number one, maybe just to make sure it's a good alignment,
Yeah.
but just to make sure that we're creating that sense of flow, like you mentioned, or that we're all aligned. Because I know sometimes families can have different opinions and couples can have different opinions, but what would you say are like the key takeaways that we need to make sure we're aligned on?
That's a really good question. It's something that, I think first and foremost, when I speak to a couple, I want to know why you want to do this. Why do you want to do a ceremony where, most weddings nowadays, most modern weddings you go to and there may be 15, 20 minutes and you're done, right? You say I do's and then you leave. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what works for you, that's perfect.
Sure.
But why do you want to incorporate the traditional aspects? Is this just a check in the box because your parents told you to do that? Are you curious to know why this ritual is still being performed after so many thousands of years? That's the first thing, understanding the why of this. And then, I often like to hear about them. What are their cultural backgrounds? What are their preferences? If they're both from Indian descent, do they have specific cultural expectations in the wedding? Because the wedding itself, I specialize in the Vedic wedding, which is the
Right.
essential how to bring two souls together. But
Mhm.
there's been so many different cultural adaptations and additions that I want to learn that and I want to respect that for them to be able to incorporate anything that might mean a whole lot. And if you're not from an Indian background, that's perfectly fine too. How much are you willing to participate? We say that this ritual is not limited just to Hindus. It's not limited to any specific religion. It's for anyone who wants to honor that joining of two souls and recognizing that sacred bond that you're going to have. So that's the second thing. And the third is I try to see, the family. What is the family dynamic and how that can enhance the ceremony? And maybe, to be honest, maybe there's some frictions there. Maybe there's some things that we need to know about the family, or maybe some things that we need to be completely upfront about
Right.
and see how we can make someone feel more comfortable. Maybe you might have a parent that might not want to be a part of a Indian wedding because they don't understand it. Are they willing to learn? Is it just completely off limits for them, and they just want to be there, they want to attend, or they just don't want to participate? So these are all the kind of things that I try to learn ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to multicultural, because I love the way that you're so intentional with the questions that you ask, because how brilliant to ask couples, are you doing this just as a checklist item, or do you want to actually know what's going on the day of your wedding and your union?
Yeah.
For multicultural couples, if they have someone like I've done uh, Hindu Jewish, Hindu
Yeah.
Chinese, all sorts of different things. Have you ever had a scenario, Neil? I can't recall one off the top of my head if we had another priest involved simultaneously.
I don't know if we have, but I certainly have. I think there was. I think there may have been a bishop that was involved in a wedding that we did. Yeah, absolutely. We see that. Like, you can't avoid it. If you have two couples that are coming from different backgrounds and both want to honor their heritage and their ancestry and their faiths, I welcome that. We say that, Sanatan Dharma, which is the traditional name for Hinduism, embraces all. Like, where we see divinity, that is celebrated.
Right.
And my thing is, again, once we honor the sanctity of the wedding, and there's many different ways that we've done it. Like, I remember when I recently worked with a bishop, they wanted to do a passage from the Bible.
Oh, right.
So we had a spot in the middle of the ceremony where I think it was before we did the production of the mangoperas, the walking around of the fire. We allowed them to incorporate that reading because it talked about love and it talked about two souls coming together. And I thought that was beautiful to be able to share that expression from a different scripture that captures the beauty. Even if it's not during the ceremony, we can incorporate it either at the end, or sometimes they'll prefer to do that ceremony first, and then we'll go into the you know, the Vedic Vivasanskar after. So there's ways to accommodate. I just ask that, another thing is wherever we approach it from, we do it with a space of honesty and a space of respect for both cultures.
Yeah, I love that, Neil. It feels very much like a green flag. It should be one of those things that if your priest is open and wants to connect and wants to build something different and unique with you while still
Hmm.
maintaining tradition and honoring the other culture that's going to be present, to me, that's a green flag. Because a red flag would be essentially saying like, "Hey, I'm sorry, but we need to keep these ceremonies separate," or "I don't think there's gonna
Hmm.
be enough time," or
Yeah.
whatever it might be, but I think those are important conversations to have. Do you feel like there's anything in particular that couples should be asking their pundits
Mm.
prior to confirming that it's a good fit? Because, I like to always say sometimes we're all on our best behavior in the beginning, but sometimes, things change. I mean, what should couples really be looking for when they're talking to their pundits? And maybe it's not a family connection. Maybe they are just sort of doing a destination wedding and, vetting different people to perform.
I mean, I'll tell you what some questions that people have asked me. People have asked me, how many weddings have you done? How long have you been doing this? I think those are valid questions. And also, one that I love to share is, do you have any references? Right? It's just like you're applying for a job or you're applying for something, you want to hear from other people. And I want to, with all due respect, again, ask for those references and just say you want to hear about what the experience of other people, and, approach it in a way that you're not necessarily questioning that they can do it, that you just want to verify that this is a good fit for you. So ask them for references, and when you reach out to those people, again, respectfully ask, how was their experience? Did everything align from the planning process? Were there any variations? Were there any surprises? Was there anything? What did you love? what are some things that you wish may have gone a little bit differently, right?
Mhm.
Those are the kinds of intentional conversations. And if someone says that, oh no, if you want to hire me, then then that's it's either take it or leave it,
Right.
then maybe that might not be the best fit for you. And I say that with all humility and respect, because this is about you all getting the answers that you need to move forward and feel comfortable on the day of your wedding. Again, you should not have any surprises, especially under that mandap. You should be able to go in with a sense of peace and a sense of, okay, we did all this planning, we put all this hard work in. Now everything is just going to be executed, and Brittany and her team is going to make sure everything around this ceremony is perfect, and everything under the mandap with the conversation of your priest, as it was discussed, will happen as you expected.
Yeah, you know what? I absolutely love collecting a reference. I think that's brilliant. And I think
Uh-huh.
that's a true testament to, hey, I've essentially had nothing to hide. I want you to talk to my past couples because I have such
Yeah.
a great relationship with them. And
Yeah.
I feel the same way. When I talk to my other couples, I'm like, listen, go talk to the bride I just married last weekend,
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
it's important, transparency is
Yeah.
important. And, some personalities aren't for everybody. I mean, the last thing we want as planners is to plan with you for a year and personalities
Mhm.
don't align, right? So it is
Yeah.
important to get references. And I love that. I think probably at least what I've gained as far as some like key takeaways for couples is the first thing is obviously intentional conversations and timing. So obviously understanding what is essential to the family and
Uh-huh.
what is flexible. And for us to just have that layer of honesty with each other of do we feel like this is ultimately going to be the right person to meet those expectations and
Yeah.
especially on timing for our wedding weekend.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think the second point is that language for me really shapes engagement because I'm with you. I think going into it, I'd written a couple notes down where I said, do we want this to be primarily devotional? Do we want it
Um,
to be explanatory? Or do
mhm.
we want this to be intentionally balanced? Because you know your guests better than we do, right? Going into this event. And so if
Uh,
everybody or if like 95% of the people there are familiar with the traditions and you don't need the translation, right? Then it can be primarily devotional. What do you think?
yeah, I think you can have it to be devotional. I see. I think that you can have it all. If you have a priest that is familiar with all of these different aspects, that incorporates all these, you can certainly have it. But again, yeah, from what your expectation is from your wedding, you need to have that conversation. And if you want to have it, I've seen where couples will have a live band. And I think, I did a wedding recently. They had a live band and we incorporated traditional songs into the ceremony. Of course, you're going to do that. You're not going to be able to have a 45-minute wedding, right? But you're incorporating that because of the value that it brings to you and it brings to your family and your guests. And it adds a different element, right? But whenever you add things, and this is something that I always tell couples, if you're starting off with a time expectation and you also want to do this and you want to do that and you want to add all these different elements, know that that limitation is going to be stretched and you're going to have to compromise somewhere. And it all depends on what is the most important thing for you. Do you want to deliver the most meaningful experience for your guests in the shortest amount of time? Or do you want to really enhance and capture the spiritual and the devotional elements of the ceremony and maybe extend it by, 20, 30 minutes and you'll get all that? So you have to see what is the priority. And I think it differs for every couple, but I think for the most part, couples want to be able to incorporate what works best for them.
I'm curious, just from your perspective on timing, because
Yeah.
timing for me, I mean, I've been doing Indian weddings myself, I mean, for 15 years, just as from a planner perspective.
Okay.
And
Wow.
it was like, when we first started, it was like 2 hours was short.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then it became like an hour and a half. And
Yeah.
now it's like couples are like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, Why do you think this is? Are they just is it such a concern about their
Mhm.
guests just completely, like, zonking out and not paying attention anymore? Like, is it just our attention span continues
Yeah.
to drop every year?
I think that's part of it, right? I think part of it is the attention span. They say 45 minutes is where you're everything after that, you're going to lose your audience,
Sure.
right? I think that's a big part of it. I think another part of it too is that we as me as a pundit, especially sometimes when people call about the wedding and they're like, "Oh, we only want a certain time." Like that's usually the first question. How long is this going to take? And I'm just like, well, there's a lot of factors that go into this. And I think that because we have developed and I would say even perfected the ceremony to a certain point to where we can take out the non-essentials and we can sharpen our tools a little bit to maybe deliver something a little bit more eloquently because we have a certain degree of scripts or certain degree of these are explanations that that makes the most impact.
Sure.
So I think over time, maybe we've just gotten better at these things, that being able to deliver the core elements in a more efficient way because we weren't thinking about it before. We weren't thinking about how can we optimize this for a modern audience with time as a factor. Remember, back in the day, time wasn't a factor, right? Time was just they had all day sometimes, and we don't have that today. We don't even have 2 hours sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And honestly, Neil, for me, the alignment that you display, even with the couples that obviously we've worked together, and hopefully couples can resonate with that and feel the effects of that from our conversation today. But alignment for me really is leadership. And that is what
Mhm.
we need from the people that are essentially going to be essentially hosting the ceremony because
Yeah.
the priests are not separate from the team, right?
No.
Everybody has to work in unison to deliver the experience that the couples and the families really want. And so
Mhm.
just as much as
Well said.
it's my duty to make sure that my priest arrives, the mandap's ready for him. People aren't still setting up. I've got the ceremonial items ready for him. Like I'm
Yeah.
cross-checking, I'm doing mic checks with him. Does he need a chair? Like all those things I'm doing so that you can shine and be your best version of yourself for that couple on that event day. And I don't, hope this year, and I hope that further years as we continue to partner with amazing people like yourself, that we start to feel the effects of there being less friction on
Mhm.
site between pundits and families and planners. And we start to feel like a little bit more unison and a little bit more embracing each other because we're all here to
Yeah.
deliver a great experience for the family. We really are. And we're all doing our best to provide that.
Yeah, and I can say from experience, I feel that. Every time I do a wedding with the Ventrix, I know that it's gonna go well, and you all know the expectations. And I will say this though, I can see from a pundit perspective why that might not be if they haven't worked with you before. Maybe they've worked with you on a limited basis, and it's just the honest truth of it. They might not know what you all are capable of. They might feel like, okay, I need to drive this ship. I need to tell them what to do when you all are working with priests, speak to them, tell them how many weddings you do. I'm sure you do that already. And, you speak the lingo well, you know the different steps, you know what's required. I think once that trust is developed, there shouldn't be any friction. However, I will say, I understand, and this is a generational thing. And again, all my humble respects to our priests, especially our senior priests. They are going to be in their ways. They're going to know like what they want. They're going to have a certain expectation. You're not changing that at this point in their lives. And this is also something that couples really need to be able to consider in their weddings. Who you would like to perform your ceremony, and I'm sure one day, I'm gonna be older, and I might be like that too. And maybe I'll say, okay, maybe I need to focus on other rituals rather than wedding. But for right now, I think all those factors play such an important part, and really, cooperating with my fellow pundits, cooperating with the team that is there to help you. They're not there to take anything away from you. They're there to make the ceremony flow and to make it impactful for all the guests. At the end of the day, that's all that we want. And I'll say one point, and this goes, you mentioned about preparation and you mentioned about, helping the priests get what they need. And I certainly respect that. You all do a great job of that. However, at the end of the day, on the day of the wedding, I I know that you all have a ton of things to do. I know that the couple has so many things to do. And I will say that no event planner should have to have one of their team members be dedicated to a priest just to be able to run around and go get things that they forget or maybe go get things that they need. And, and again, all respects. And this goes in the mindset of being able to plan and being able to be self sufficient on the date of the ceremony. If I'm doing a large wedding, then maybe I might have my wife come and help me, and that way I don't have to burden you all or something. But rarely that ever happens nowadays. I'm able to get all the essential items that we discussed that I would be bringing. I get it set up. I arrive early. Timing is so important to me. Punctuality is so important. We have to get there on time. We have to start on time. We have to finish on time. All these things matter so much.
Yeah, I love that, Neil, and obviously we so value that. It's so interesting because I think going back to your point, I almost sometimes forget that I'm a white woman approaching the pundit like, "Hey," like, "Hey,"
Me too.
"Hey,
I
would you be
forget it too.
ready?"
I don't.
And so sometimes maybe there is a little bit of that need of like, maybe like an introduction.
Yeah,
Obviously I've chatted with them before, but
sure.
mostly the time it's not on a Zoom call, to be totally honest with you. It's usually a regular
Hmm.
call. So the first time I'm meeting them, I'm approaching them and they're probably like, what the heck does this girl know? Like, don't talk to me. But I think it's really interesting because I will say throughout the course of my career, when the priest arrives, I tell my girl, I have a whole person completely designated to them, regardless if they need me or not, because
Okay.
not in a bad way, but I very much take like almost like a subservient role because I'm like,
Mm,
the show literally is completely, it's almost like a little bit of a fear. It's like the whole show is contingent whether or not that pundit is on schedule and
mm.
has a little pep in his step and is ready to keep
Uh-huh.
this thing cruising, or, you know, doesn't. And it's like bride's
Uh-huh.
been up since 2 o'clock in the morning in hair and makeup just so that she could be on time for this ceremony. And
Yeah.
sometimes we deliver brides literally to the T into the mandap, and yet ceremony's over and we're an hour late. And I'm like, oh gosh, and it affects lunch timing and flow and bride and
Yeah.
so it's a whole thing. And not to get on a tangent about that, but I think you're right. I mean, I think at some point I probably need to.
Yeah. And maybe when you know that you're working with a certain pundit, you can have, one of your team members doing something else and
Right.
slowly incorporate that. But you all do such a great job. I was wondering about that, because I did a wedding, the last wedding that I did, I believe it was Whitney that was just kind of hovering around the mandap area. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, now it makes sense. You're probably there to see that, okay, maybe let's see if Neil forgets something or he needs to have her run, somewhere.
I have faith in you, Neil. It's more just like, I swear every single time on my banquet event orders, I'm like, I need yogurt, milk, honey, sugar. I need all these things delivered to the mandap 30 minutes before guest seating, like, because I want them to be fresh and cold
Yeah.
but it really is just because I have immense respect for the people that are coming in to uphold the traditions that are so important to this family,
Mhm.
that I want to provide the best possible platform for them to be able to deliver that experience for the couple. And so, whatever minor role that I can play in aiding in that, or my team can,
Mhm.
we're going to be participants in that.
Yeah, and you all, like I said, I can't speak to it enough. You all have gotten it down and it's been I know your couples, I see your reviews that you get and the experiences. That is what it's all about. At the end of the day for all of us, right? Being able to see the joy on their faces and to say my trust in you was validated. I had so many other options as a pundit, as an event planner, as a photographer, all these different, services. And the most gratifying experience that any of us could hope for is to hear those words that, you really enhance my day and you made it, what I thought it was going to be. And even sometimes even more.
Yeah, honestly, Neil, like you crushed it, and I so appreciate the conversation and
Yeah.
the connection. And I hope that this has brought clarity to couples out there and to validate also some of the things that maybe you've been feeling. And I would highly
Yeah.
recommend that anybody who either has been in a situation like this or has a family member coming up or somebody that would benefit from listening to today's episode,
Yeah.
just share it with them, because I feel more intentional conversation is really what moves the needle and bringing the shared result that essentially we're really all looking for. And so thank you so much, Pandit Neal, again for
Absolutely.
and
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany, as always, for the great work, for the great conversation. And, we're all in the same goal. We're all in the same goals to deliver an exceptional experience for couples. And I'm so blessed that we're able to, engage at this level and be able to add value in that experience. And yes, I echo that. Please share this. My goal is to, again, spread positivity in the world and to, if you know someone that's getting married or thinking about getting married, share this ahead of time so they can plan in advance. Have all these questions lined up for any priest, whether it's me or not, any priest that you speak with, or,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Neil. So appreciate your
thank
time as
you.
always.
Namaste.